I was just wondering, Noel put down some ideas around last week's discussion on a GitHub discussion as a way to try and move forward and make some progress. Did people do something with that?
We can look into it. For reference, I should also share that discussion.
Also, two raised hands.
Yep. Let's get into that. Who's raising hands? Lisa and Christella. Okay, in that order. Go ahead.
So me first, or Lisa?
Yeah. If Lisa is shy to talk, you can take over.
Okay. So I have something technical to ask because okay. So I've been writing some articles about basic stuff for onboarding people, and I'm trying to bring some friends, and they create the wallet and all that. But I had something really, I see something interesting there. So they're trying, new people trying to get the wallet, and they're trying to buy something. They try to do stuff on the chain. So I'm worried about CPU. Why? Because one of my friends made their wallet and they wanted to buy something really like, it was something really cheap that they like. And he was staking CPU, like really a lot of CPU net and run. And he was like, how much do I need to stake to buy this? He was trying to buy something and he said, you need more CPU, you need more CPU. And he was staking and staking and staking. And I was worrying about that because if this is gonna be for new people after create the wallet, that is a huge process. So when is the fun gonna start? So I don't know if something is happening with CPU. I know they have some change haven't made, so maybe we have something there that we haven't looked at. I'm not technical, so you guys are. So
can you share the account?
What?
Can you share the wallet name so that we have an idea about, I don't know, like if what can happen is that if there's a subjective billing error, which means you did something that the API doesn't like, so they just reject you even if you have enough CPU staked. Sometimes that error doesn't translate properly. Like you can do some things that causes errors on the back end. And if that happens too much, they say, well, we're just going to charge you infinite amount of wax for a transaction so it will fail, just as a way to protect it. So if you say they have lots of wax staked,
well, not a lot of wax, but for someone new, this is like a lot.
But that's why can you share maybe in private their wallet so that I can take a look about what kind of numbers that we're talking about, so that I can rule out some things? Because without context, it's really hard to answer these things.
This is something that it's not the first time that I heard. It's not the first time, and because I've been hearing that a lot, so I think this is maybe an issue that we can, I don't know, make some tests, maybe making some, so you guys can make some new accounts and trying to buy something, trying to make some, anyone technical trying to do that. And I think this is something that we need to see and test, because how can we onboard people if they can even make a simple, it's so difficult to buy something because they're having hard time with staking something that they don't even know what,
there also
that means.
used to be like for some of the marketplaces that they would cover the CPU. There's also about 20 free transactions from the cloud wallet that should be covered. So there should be like lots of stuff that you can do before even having to have any CPU staked.
Yeah,
so
I was going to ask, is something there not working?
Contact. Sorry?
Is something there not working with the free transactions that every user pretty much gets?
Yeah, I don't know, but that's why we need.
I don't think there are any free transactions anymore. Whenever I want to do a Cloud Wallet transaction, I'm always queried to pay fees. I never get any free transactions on my Cloud Wallet accounts anymore.
Have they
And
removed that?
another stuff that is happening is that CPU must when you make some actions in the blockchain, you spend like CPU, and then you get that back in time. That's how it should work. So I don't think it's coming back the way that should be. Like
I just quickly want to jump in, and as Null also mentioned in the chat, then sometimes I think the APIs can have some errors that makes them basically always tell you don't have enough CPU. So sometimes you just have to change your API, and then your transaction can go through without any problems. So depending on also what kind of transaction they were trying to do. Now you're saying that really they were trying to buy something. They can try to buy that thing from another marketplace. For example, Nifty Blocks got their own APIs. Atomic Hub used their own, and so on. So yeah, that could be a possible way to get around it. Or there's the option of just renting a little bit of CPU for the day using the Wax Power Up. You can maybe put 0.1 wax into that, and then you can buy all the things you want, at least for that day.
yeah.
And yeah.
Well, that's a good solution, but I'm trying to see the bigger picture, because like I can say that, like, use this because he can ask me stuff. But what happens if we had someone new and doesn't know about this? So he's gonna drop up like, oh, I'm spending too much time in this. I'm gonna do another things and never come back.
Yeah.
So
that is
we need to make something more easier for people. So maybe we should make some tests about see what's going on. Just that.
Ross,
What's the actual status with Power Up? When I say status, what's the ratio? Because I know that, like for instance, on EOS, self-staking doesn't really do anything at all. It's got no weight. You have to use the Power Up mechanism in order to get the appropriate amount of resources. On Wax, it started off at a level, and it was slowly that it was moving. Like at this point right now, self-staking does carry weight. It definitely still gives you resources, but we have a Power Up mechanism as well that needs to get used. I think all of like our BP accounts and stuff, there's a lot of self-stake, and it seems to cover all the resources that we need at the moment, but I haven't really played with smaller accounts. I think Power Up is a very key thing here, right? That's probably what your first port of call for a new user rather than them self-staking, you know? So has anybody got any experience with smaller accounts?
Yeah,
and using Power Up? Yeah.
I both tried staking just small amounts, and I tried using Power Up. So the problem with staking small amounts is that you continuously run into errors where your consumption is overestimated. So usually 2 to 10 times what you actually need in CPU. And this results in your transaction failing, and then you run into subjective billing and your transaction fails completely. And then you have to switch the API until you find one that doesn't overestimate your transaction. Because usually API nodes are pretty loaded, and that's why they usually overestimate. And this also to some extent extends to the Power Up system that's currently implemented by the Wax Cloud Wallet, because the Wax Cloud Wallet estimates your CPU consumption and then proposes the fee you have to pay to rent. And this also is usually around 5 times the amount you actually need. And in some instances I had, there were complete erroneous calculations where it wanted me to stake like 100 times of what I actually needed. So I had a transaction where I should have paid like 0.01 wax, and it wanted me to pay 0.85. So
That's really
it has
bad.
gotten less, but it's still an issue. And even when it's estimating lower, it usually is estimating quite a couple times the amount you actually need.
Anders, did you want to add something?
No, I just said it. That's really bad. That shouldn't happen.
Yeah, it might need to be a target for like the OIG stuff, that an API can't overestimate more than a certain factor and make sure that there's enough capacity to do accurate estimations, because as you tell, all the
I know
non-power
Kiefer looked
user-
into that for all.
I have been
Yes.
bringing that up time and time and time again, and Andrews had also been looking into that.
Yeah.
With testing the endpoints. The problem with PowerUp is that this is run on internal systems of WAX core team. So we don't really have any lever on that. But I am in talks and keep pinging the team about that, and they know it's an issue, and I've brought it up a couple times. But so far, they don't have a solution that would not significantly increase the cost of maintaining their service. So I've got a couple ideas that I'm going to discuss with them probably this week on how to maybe implement it. But yeah. But for our system internally, we will probably start to evaluate performance of APIs at some point.
Yeah, at least that makes sure that the stuff that is under our control leads by example, you know?
That's why I built the dashboard for CPU. Yeah, exactly.
What are we looking at here, Anders?
You can see this. It's a lot of numbers. So this is a bigger one where you're looking at how you're under overbilling different actions compared to the average of everyone else. And the key number is in the top, where you can see that on average it's 2.2% less than all others. And then you can see that some actions like the farmer's token transfer is 2 times as highly billed here as other ones. And this is not always relevant on each individual action. So you can't really go and just take this data and say, hey, you suck at this, because it's a bigger picture. What this does is it gives you a direction to see if you are vastly overbilling for everything, you have a big problem. If you have, if majority is overbilling or some action is overbilling always, then a guild can go and start to look into their infrastructure and see, okay, can we figure out if there's anything we can do here, tweak something, change something, and see if these numbers are affected. So it's basically a system to help teams understand rather than just say, hey, this is bad, this is good.
That's on the block producer though, right? That's
Yes.
actual block selection.
Yes.
We often have that issue with APIs, right? Because APIs are more likely not going to be running on, game servers, because they're taking like millions of transactions a day. They need lots of
Yeah, and that's
network
why you get
resources
these
and-
overbillings estimations on transactions. If they do calculations on a slow API node for how much you should charge in PowerUp, that will not be accurate for what the producers will charge when the action actually go through.
Isn't the producers actual though, right? So I mean, obviously, all the API itself is just a speculative thing, so that there can be some kind of trip switch if someone is trying to abuse it, and regardless of what happens there, whatever it thinks it may cost, by the time it gets to the BP is the actual.
Yeah,
It'll
exactly.
only charge you actual. You only ever get charged actual. Just
But
getting
for a
through the
small
front door
account,
sometimes.
that's the problem,
Yeah.
because they will be refused on the way to the block producers, because the API will say, hey, we are overbilling you by 5 times, you don't have this CPU, and they will not be pushed to the block producer. So that's the problem. And if you have a lot of stake, then you get overbilled, but it doesn't matter on the API level, and then you go to the BP and you get the real billing. But you get there every time because you have so much stake.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we won't find out why it was overbuilt and by how much it was overbuilt if it was We don't track that. We can't track that from the outside.
No, you can't track the. Well, you can test the APIs. That's the only thing you can do. But then each team that you test towards, they might have 1 node or 5 nodes or 10 nodes behind that proxy, and you don't know which one you are actually hitting. And sometimes you might be build under, sometimes you might be build over. Well, under is almost never a case for anyone because you have a slower machine for your API.
It's API, yeah.
So what I did was I just underfunded an account, and then I pushed the same transaction to the same API over and over again, and collected the error messages that would tell me how much billing I should have. And then I made a spreadsheet with that to just get an idea for the performance of the individual VPs.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to
So-
know that. I'd love to know that information. I mean, I have no idea.
So my idea was essentially what Andrews built and make an API from that people
Yeah.
can query for the Power Up. So that you have essentially a Power Up API that looks up how much is this supposed to cost, and then the user can self-determine how much do I want to overpay to make sure the transaction goes through, or just keep it low so I try again if it fails.
Rakuten, if you go to action breakdown on the left side.
I did that a couple minutes ago, and the application crashed.
Oh, it might be because we moved stuff in the backend for Hetchner thing.
So it's
Yeah, I can
loading.
look. I can look at it. See, it's probably it can't communicate with the node right now because I moved stuff around today.
Right.
You know, this
But
just
there you can see the
highlights-
last 24 hours, the cost of an action.
Hmm.
the actual cost, yeah. But you know, this Kayfa, you know, this highlights the issue that Christella is actually trying to say. I mean, some kid that wants to play with some NFTs or some game shouldn't have to go to a dashboard to figure out how much power up they need in order to get their transaction going through. You know, it should just be a seamless thing.
Yeah, but right now there isn't even really an interface on Wax to use Power Up other than the Cloud Wallet. So
Yeah.
how I
Well,
envision it. Yeah,
It's
sorry,
in,
go on.
it's in Wax Block. Wax Block's got it. I think Wax Fusion have got an interface as well.
Yeah,
And I think there's another place as well.
yeah.
I just haven't personally used it. On the EOS mainnet. You get forced to use it. You have to use it.
Yeah. What I would love for this is to have it inside Anchor, and essentially same as with when you use MetaMask on Ethereum, you get the response, and then you can see
It works now,
Oh, it's
Rakuten.
supposed to
Action
pay.
breakdown.
this many this much on gas fees.
Yeah.
Then I can adjust the slider to make sure it goes through or it goes through faster. And we could build the same system for Wax with Power Up, where the user is in control.
Do you know? Just so you know, there's a Power Up smart contract that was developed by the Boyd team on EOS, where you can set up some parameters and give it some Wax to use for whenever you require a Power Up, and within those parameters, it'll automatically power up for you when you need it. And you say don't ever pay too much, so you give it some parameters. So that actually exists.
Oh, nice, yeah.
as a
That's what we
dashboard.
wanted to have originally, and then the Wax team slimmed it down to just use the Power Up we have now.
Yeah, it needs to be automatic or easier. Yeah, but I'm with you.
Yeah, so this dashboard where Rakuten is now, on the top you can see the average cost of this transaction for the last 24 hours. Across each BP, and in the top you can see the total average. That's the estimation how much it likely will be charged. You can see that it's not 2 times, but it's almost on some. But that's also the difference here is you can't really say that they are always 2 times as slow, because they might have more bigger transactions that take longer to do. They might push actions to accounts that have smart contracts that require processing before you can finish that action and things. So it's not really as easy as, hey, bigger number is bad, because you need to actually go and break down things. But if a BP is always slower on everything, then that's a pattern and that's a problem.
you could distinctly inline everything and make that the group by, and then you get an actual apples versus apples comparison. But
What did you mean?
basically, when you do a transaction, you can have like notifications that trigger other
Yeah.
stuff. So if you take the whole chain of everything that gets executed as your unique key, then you won't have an average inline, but you have every unique path that gets taken, and then you could pretty much
Yeah, it's a little bit difficult to do that on Elasticsearch.
I maybe make it sound too easy, but that's the path that you would have to take
Yeah.
to get actual.
We would have to build new indexes to follow that. That's what I came to when I had the problems with that.
Yeah, but this is a great start and a great way to estimate and at least gauge something, because you have to always account a bit for the outliers, but this is a good indication for sure.
Did I not give any numbers on this one? Oh, it's a top use. Okay. I thought it was action breakdown.
No, top authorized.
Yeah, that's
users.
how many accounts are using it and everything.
Okay, guys, so that was very technical. What do we tell Kristalla now?
The big issue is that every case probably needs a little bit of investigation to give an actual answer for what's going on. So that's the hard stuff, right? There are various ways where you can check your research usage. I made a page like 3 years ago that lets you look into how much of your CPU is used. Alien Worlds has a similar view. Your Cloud Wallet has a similar view. That should at least give you like the
But the easiest thing for a user is to try to buy it from different marketplaces. If you use Anchor, then you will not change your API between them because you will push to the API in Anchor.
Yeah, but a starting user won't use Anchor.
Yeah, so just use try different NFT marketplaces. They all use the same inventory for their marketplaces mainly.
I also quickly want to say that if developers also enable their dApps to automatically change APIs or select one that isn't miscalculating, then that could also be another angle to perhaps
But then you would
solve the
need
issue.
to understand. You need to have that information, and it might not be very easy to get at all times.
You could automatically try a different API when a transaction fails, but yeah, it's not a simple fix for sure.
I have built small tools to test this on different APIs, but I have nothing that is production ready or nothing that can be used to collect data that can be shared in an API or anything. It needs more testing to ensure that there's no errors and everything.
But it might be something that could get added to the Sentinel stuff and the Query Hub libraries that are being made, right? Where you already have like health checks for which endpoints are available. You could also use that as your pool, like when you run into an issue to try, okay, if there's a transaction, retry the same transaction without even telling the user against a different API to see if there's a different outcome before even bothering the user, right?
I think I've heard or seen some dApps use, I'm not entirely sure, but pings to just ping some different APIs and then
Yeah, but
figure
that's
out.
response time to the API, not how long the transaction will take to execute.
Yeah, okay, that's true.
So I think you can solve it, but I think you need to think more about it. What Kiefer talked about is a great solution to have a better system for calculating how much it actually costs on the beforehand for power up and things like that. That's not that doesn't solve the stake problem if a user has a few wax staked and get different response from different APIs. That's very hard to fix. Testing and poking teams is the only way, I think.
Yeah, that's why I suggested to make it an actual metric that gets tracked and maybe even punished. But yeah, that also raises the cost for the VPs, sadly.
It's also, yeah, you can do that. You just need volume of testing, because you can have at one time that node might have a lot of load. when you test it, and that might impact the numbers poorly. And next time you try it, that's not the same case. So you need the volume of data to actually get a reasonable average. Like on the page right now, you have actions. You have from 30,000 actions to 55,000 actions. Then you get a decent average or median number.
Okay, so we're talking about testing the RPC nodes from the outside, the wallet nodes.
I think that's
simple use.
the only thing you can do, and it's and then you can't take one number against another number. You have to take multiple numbers from same provider.
Any suggestion how often such a test should happen across like every guild? Are we talking about an hourly test?
I don't think you
daily
should.
test?
I don't think guild operators should know how often you test it.
No, of course, out of schedule.
Frequent.
You won't know. You won't know when that happens. Like how frequent? Every 5 minutes a transaction, or every hour for a short period of time, like a week or so, to gather data.
Probably closer to once a minute than once an hour. But is there actually a way to dry run a transaction without saying, only do all the calculations, tell me how expensive it is, without actually executing? Because
That's an endpoint.
Yeah, then that would be a great way to get snapshots in time. So why don't we do that? At least start gathering some info.
What if you send a transaction that is so big that it is certain to fail, and then go from how much above it fails?
No, it will just be thrown, I think.
And you will get subjective billing errors probably from that too, right? You will probably just get blocked from trying to do stuff when you do that.
Okay.
You have a
Well,
max time per block and everything.
And another idea I was just thinking about is why currently for like a normie user using Wax, if a transaction fails, it just gives them a message saying you're missing like this many milliseconds or whatever. And what if it also told them that you would need so much extra Wax stake to be able to have pass this transaction?
That's kind of what Kiefer was talking about, what with power up, and that could be extended for how much stake you need as well.
But you can already just do that in the UI right now, because I think it's like around 13 wax per millisecond CPU right now. So you can do that math and just extrapolate how much you would need.
But you need to do that on the front end for the user.
Yep.
I think the power up itself also costs some CPU, right?
Yeah, probably.
Okay, listen, we're building that test. Who's available?
Ask in the guild chat who needs points.
Yeah, but first comes first serve, or I don't know how it's even called, but you guys are in the call today, so.
I'm not a BP, so.
Yeah, sure. But you're a valuable member of the developer community on Wax, so.
To test all the push nodes for all the guilds, you need to put in quite a bit of time to do it. Kiefer has already tried, and I think he already knows how much time you need to do it properly.
But this is something that could definitely be funded through Wax Labs.
Yeah, we need someone to assist Kiefer in automating that.
I would probably suggest building like a standalone runner that can report to a central station that you can basically run on any endpoint, so that you don't have a fixed IP that it comes from. So you can just like, hey, do you want to run some tests today? Run this executable for an hour or two, and then you could do it that way and have multiple agents try stuff and report back.
I think there should just be an API that people can spin up as quality of life API.
Okay, that seems like we're talking about a little about something more than just a test script to have some wallets funded with a few WAGs and pushing those transactions.
You want to calculate the error messages?
I think it's about calculate or querying the APIs for their estimate, right? That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Sending the transaction to the API, getting the estimate for how much is going to be built. Ideally, we have I don't know what would make sense, but let's say we would take something that we can estimate. What would we test? Would we test in token transfer? Would we test some
Different
prime
things.
number calculation?
You need to test
Be
multiple things.
configurable.
Okay. What are those things that we are testing? Token transfer.
I think the
Uh,
most common transactions are on Wax. So
Yeah,
alien mine transactions, token transfers, NFT transfers, maybe minting, stuff like that.
You can look at the top used contract actions and then use those.
It should not be rocket science to build something that has that configurable. Like if you realize, hey, we want to test that too, just add it to the list and then.
No, but you can actually pull the top used contracts and actions from the chain for the last 24 hours and then use those to test, and then you will test different things moving forward, and it will adapt to whatever the chain adapt to. Because the numbers that are interesting are the numbers that the users actually interact with.
Sure.
Okay, so who of you guys is building it?
It would be fun, but I don't have the capacity right now.
Don't you think you should put it up like on the GitHub thing that you started?
Yeah, sure. We will. Just looking for a quicker resolution to that. If someone would commit into, yeah, I've got time, I want to build it.
Yeah,
Maybe
I
just
already
on
done
the
a lot of
niche.
thinking on this topic, but I don't have the capacity right now.
I mean, it's not that much work. I think if you really want it fast, I can free up some time and build it. But yeah, I would still do it the proper way and put it up on GitHub. And
Yeah. I
would
also think we should discuss with Waxing what's useful for them, so that we end up with something that in the end will benefit all the Cloud Wallet users that currently are left a little bit in the dark.
Okay, then let's stick with the process. Let's open an RFP discussion about that. We are syncing with the Wax team tomorrow. Let's ask them also for their feedback on that. Opening, then writing the RFP, which we will then discuss, and then whoever comes forth first can build it. Of course, as a labs proposal, funded by Wax Labs. Perfect type
the
of
only
contribution.
criteria, because I'll do it for 3 million, no problem.
Yeah,
Million micro Wax.
yeah, exactly. Wax Toshi. All right. We talked about that. We have another topic I want to introduce because it was asked for. Shall we read through it together? It's quite a complicated one. I'm not even sure if we will manage to have a proper discussion about that. But any feedback on this is appreciated. So last week we talked about.
Did I post my feedback? I know I started writing something. No, I didn't.
Yeah, I mean, we're here together. If you want to take the chance and comment on it.
Not really, no. Also include Lars here, so.
Yeah, he's also not here to add
But
further remarks or
overall,
ideas to that.
There's a lot of misconception and misunderstanding of how the current system actually works and how the pay is distributed. And at the core, we have a two-track system because we already separate infrastructure and product calls. We just then in the end match the stores together, but they're separately evaluated and the pay you receive in the end is based on your contribution. So if you only run infrastructure and you can be a standby, and then you have a standby pay and infrastructure provider pay, that's 5K roughly, or 6K now. And based on that, you could already do that. And we don't have to have a separate track for that. So if people say they want to have a track where people can run less infrastructure, that would essentially mean we need to lower the barrier of entry and lower the minimum pay. And that would result in the same without designing a whole new system and whole new evaluation scheme and everything. And also, I think the overall problem would not change because guilds would still compete, because right now they are competing, and that's the whole issue. And they will not just stop competing in one of the categories because there's a two-track system. Guilds will still join in on both tracks and try to get as many points on both tracks as they can. And that will all still result in instances where, for example, guilds are overspending. So I think there are guilds right now in the top 21 that run Hyperion, for example, a full Hyperion, to remain in top 21. But they're probably spending more money to maintain this full Hyperion than they're getting in pay for this. So if they were to stop maintaining Hyperion at all, or the full Hyperion, and just do partial, they would drop from top 21 to standby. But if you're at the top of standby, you only earn 1.5% less. So you need to ask yourself, is these 1.5K more in pay actually worth the trouble of running and maintaining a full Hyperion? I think for some guilds, if their products don't need a full Hyperion or something, they could just stop providing it and would probably be better off, unless they run really, really cheap, crappy hardware and have a sysadmin that is well able to handle that for free, essentially. Just my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, I know your stance on such a change. I do really welcome that you outlined that the current system is indeed working when it comes to competition between guilds. However, I will still remain on the position that the current incentive in providing tech ops is 50% of the reward, and in most cases 50% of the score, of the total score. And I think that's due to clearly there is an incentive in providing infrastructure for points to a point which we have reached this year, where we have 21 full Hyperions in the network because it grants you the points that you need to either overcome the 125 point threshold into a standby position, or in many other instances, it is more easy to spin up an Hyperion and Light API and an IPFS than building a product to receive the same score. And I think there can be some improvements there, which doesn't necessarily mean you would take that into two-track system, separating everything, but clearly something needs to change so that we don't have 21 full Hyperions anymore. We don't have 30 plus atomic assets APIs in the network.
Yeah, definitely. But I think that's different issues. And
I have a question there.
yeah, sure.
Is the problem that there are a lot of APIs, or is the problem that there are not enough focus on products?
Yes. So surely we receive new contributions, but I'd assess it has slowed down, or the contributions are focused, concentrated on developer tools, guild tools, monitoring tools, rather than enhancements to the creator scene or consumer products. So one of the goals such a chain would like to achieve is providing better funding to product development on Wax.
Yeah, but we could do that, for example, as I mentioned the other day, by just reducing the threshold. Reduce the point. If you take full Iberian away, reduce score potentially on some other infrastructure stuff, and then reduce the minimum pay. So not reduce the overall pay, but just the minimum entry barrier. So let's say right now you have to have 125 points, and the minimum pay you earn is 6K. So we could just pull that down and say you only need to earn 60 points, and for these 60 points you start to get 3K, and then from there we scale. And this would put more worth on providing and developing products, because there's just not as much infrastructure to provide, and the infrastructure doesn't add as much pay. So this has all grown out of the case that we, over the last years, we needed more and more infrastructure. When we started this, there was Hyperion, that was it. And then we had to add Atomic Acids API, we added Light API, we added IPFS, and all the Oracle, and all sorts of other stuff that would grant you points for tech and infrastructure. So at the same time, we removed and reduced other stuff, but overall, there is way many more points to gain these days just by providing infrastructure that brings you above the threshold. Originally, it was never intended. So actually, the original intention was that you should never be able to get above the threshold for your standby position without providing without having products, just by infrastructure. So the balance right now is simply off.
So just add a minimum product point then.
Yeah, we sort of did that. So what we did at the first hurdle was that every new guild has to have at least one product that is viable and would score a point and has significance to the ecosystem. And unless they have that, then they can't become a paid standby. The problem is just retroactively applying that to guilds that have been around for years. Maybe I'm too nice for that. I don't know.
Are there many 21 that don't have a product then?
Sorry, what again? You got cut off.
Are there many top 21s that don't have a product?
No, there's none that don't have a product in top 21, but we have standby guilds that have no real product, that are struggling with the products. It's just like that.
It has also become increasingly difficult to identify opportunities on Wax or with Web3, especially if you want so. So you will often be confronted with the question, what should we build next?
That's probably the most heard question we get. What should we build? And we're like, yeah, that's something we don't know.
That's why it's good when Kristalla comes and talks about user interactions like today, because a lot of teams, if they are using the chain, they have a lot of stake because they have been there for a long time, or they are not using the same same tools, same web services and everything. So it's good to get new user interaction information.
Another critique I heard recently about our public infrastructure setup is we are allocating the same points on essentially every single API, and when we evaluate the uptime and the integrity of data on those APIs, for example, Hyperion, full Hyperion. But that's only half of the picture, because we treat or we reward Ross from Eosphere with 4 points for his Hyperion, and Max Green also with 4 points for their full Hyperion hosted on bare metal and horizontally scaled. while a standby can manage to come in and book a VPS on Hetzner and get their Hyperion started from EOS Sphere's Elasticsearch repository. And I think that's also a small detail that could be changed by taking the full Hyperion out of the text course and making it like essentially a product contribution for those guilds that are able to provide at the highest quality. Essentially, that's their contribution to the chain. You know? How do you feel about that? That's also inspired by a comment yesterday. Caracol Block, one of the recently added guilds on Wax, wrote a short message on guild's public channel, I think, that they transitioned their partial Hyperion to full Hyperion. And they won't have a hard time maintaining it if they know how. But instead, you have other providers of Hyperion that took a long time to build up all the knowledge to be able to operate that software on Wax, and they also have like 10-20-fold traffic on their APIs compared to Caracol. So I think that's where that system is failing.
But stuff like the Query Hub and the Sentinel thing, once stuff like that gets rolled out, it would make sure that all those APIs also get used, and then you would see probably the errors arise, right?
Yeah, that's something we definitely look forward for. And down the line, I still want, and have been wanting for a long time, to measure performance and evaluate endpoints not only by uptime, but also by performance. It's just hard to implement because we're not on the inside. But maybe that's something that can be done with Notepulse.
Yeah,
and then return Query Hub.
You should probably also strike up conversation with the Anchor team, the Grey Mass team, to make sure that Wharf gets that stuff integrated by default, so that everybody that makes new stuff also gets to use that right away, if possible.
Yeah.
Any other feedback or comment on that RFP discussion? Feel free to talk about that.
No, I just figured because it was such a contentious issue last time, emotions ran high. And one of the comments that were made was like, well, we keep talking about this in circles for a long time. And there's a point to that. Like, lots of discussion seems to free flow for a long time because there's nobody that really takes point and pushes stuff forward. I know that's hard because, they try to make it an open conversation, but if you want to go somewhere, you probably need somebody to take the lead and push it forward, or even say that, okay, before we talk about stuff, make sure there are stakeholders that put up a good proposition that make sure that it moves forward or not. That there is something to be said about that, to make the threshold to talk about stuff a bit more higher, especially if you want to invoke change, to prevent that you just keep talking in circles about stuff for a long time. So that's why I think that what Null did to put it down and try to see if we could get a more structured talk and move in in one direction, either like do it or don't do it, but just make it a bit more formal so that it's less free flowing and optional, right? So yeah, I think that would be great if there is a topic where you want to incite change, that there's at least one or a group of people that takes the lead there to push it forward until it goes through or gets cancelled.
Okay, what I think is missing, and we should always have with these topics, what's also missing from the proposal from Include Null is to actually define what are the problems we see and where do we want to get to. And from the two-track system, this is more of a let's change this, but it doesn't give a reasoning why to change this. What do we want to achieve with this? What does it make easier? And that's where I think this fails. And
I found that is an issue with a lot of the circular discussion that we have, where there actually isn't a sort of problem statement. This. I find it difficult to follow, and it's also these meetings are late. And I just want to add one thing, and this is going to probably come across as being quite controversial, but I would like to see what the WAX organization bring some representation to these kind of discussions, like regularly. I mean, I feel
they
like
join if we invite them and have a specific topic. So if whenever we have a specific topic, we can invite them and they join. And other than that, we carry whatever we discuss here to the WAX team. We have a bi-weekly meeting with the WAX team and discuss everything we discuss with the guilds, with the community, and the ecosystem.
So the ORG have a good relationship with them.
Yes.
I can tell you that most of us have got zero relationship with them.
Yeah, I know. Now we have regular
from my perspective. I mean, and let's be honest. This isn't like a normal public blockchain. It's controlled by the WAX organization, right? They want specific outcomes. We are here. We do stuff. I often feel like it's us trying to wag the dog with what we think we may or may not want to do. What would the organization like to see from the people that are actually running and building on the network that they own?
That's all question.
So you have regular contact with the WAX organization. Perhaps it would be fantastic to get a summary from your conversations and have that as a starting. Hey guys, we met with the team on our usual Wednesday and we discussed this and this, and this is the feedback we got back. And maybe we can talk about it a little bit. Because when WAX first launched, I used to have a relationship with the WAX organization. And people have come and gone over the years. And right now, as one of the block producers, one of the guilds that runs a hell of a lot of infrastructure for them, I mean, you should see our API is constantly used by the WAX wallet. Our Hyperions we take millions of transactions every single day. I would think that they would want to at least have a conversation with us that are running everything. And I don't have a conversation with them. I have these meetings and I'm sleepy when I come here. And I'm not grumpy. This is just me trying to be controversial and speak my mind at the end of this meeting.
Yeah.
I don't think you're controversial.
Absolutely not. No. Even to us, sometimes we're unsure what the WAX team actually wants because they tell us what they're doing and what they're planning, but they don't really say we want to go down that path or this path. We know right now they're focused on meme stuff, on meme coins, but they don't really give us a direction on what they want to do on WAX. So we have to juggle that on our own. And we mostly talk about the ecosystem, about infrastructure and stuff like that. And we have little input on what the WAX team would like to be built.
Yeah, but it's also like, if we're honest with ourselves, the WAX team doesn't care about these details. If the change runs, they're happy. They don't care about these details on this level. At least I haven't gotten that impression at all, ever.
Yeah, I want to make the remark here. So that RFP discussion you're seeing on my screen, how we came here, it was us during the past weeks or months, on multiple occasions talking about we see an increase on APIs in the landscape, and there's no definite claim to be made here, but we did agree that we might have too many APIs at some point if people spin up those APIs to receive an ORG score. So we identified on our own a flaw.
But it feels
here.
like that is a symptom, not an actual problem.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of
APIs is a good thing.
a lot
just
of these
want to
discussions
clarify.
seem to circle around the symptoms and what you perceive to be a problem rather than what the actual problem is or what you actually want to achieve. Because there might be a lot of things that look like problems that might not be relevant to the actual goal. So, and I think that's a big problem.
You're right, but I'm not sure why we are talking about let's identify the problem, because we did that already in the past.
No, we didn't.
We did. We were talking about what if we didn't have 21 full Hyperions, but 10. And each of those Hyperions have a cost of, let's say, imaginary cost of, not imaginary, actually that's real cost, right? Servers plus manpower to maintain the API, I don't know, 2K? Let's put it that.
Let's say you remove 10 of them, what will happen?
We save 20K on budget on infrastructure
How?
to build. Because those Hyperions would not be run anymore.
No,
No, the
but
problem.
the same amount of tokens goes out to the same teams, right?
Yeah, what would they do with the tokens to earn OAG points? They would build products.
Yeah, but would they? And that's the problem. That's
sure?
why I say the problem
they
is
did-
not.
Yeah, but if they didn't, they wouldn't qualify as a guild on Wax.
Yeah, and this means the actual problem is not how many APAs we have, but how we allocate points and judge who becomes an APP.
Yes.
And that's the problem. And then we can go further and say the problem is not the overspending, because even if we had that money, the money is coming out of savings, and it's not that we would do anything big if we had 20K more in savings. The 20K don't really matter. The problem to me is that we have too many APIs that are underperforming and underused. And then
Exactly.
again,
So we're-
everybody is paid the same. And that's the problem, that every API is paid the same, no matter if it's used, if it has a good performance or stuff like that.
Yeah,
So that's
there you have the problem. And I mean, you're repeating, both of you, Anders and you're repeating what I just said. We are overspending a budget on public infrastructure that is underperforming or not used.
Yeah, but that's the point, is the overspending is not the problem.
It's a simple.
No,
It's just a
spend-
symptom.
I mean, nobody's talking about defunding those guilds. It's just about nobody inquired us, hey, cut the budget or whatever it is. Nobody did that.
No. That was something that was actually requested. It said some guilds said, make an infrastructure track and pay the guilds less. That
Yeah,
was
That's
requested.
what I said. Yeah.
I think, okay. I think that's part of the curse if you decide to have less APIs on the public infrastructure or the ones that are qualitatively, you know what I mean, compared to those very heavily used APIs. But still, there's an incentive to bring up those APIs, and we want a fair. So how we concepted it is a fair system, and we treat everyone the same. So no matter if I spin up a full Hyperion as a guild tomorrow, I receive the same score as what.
So the problem is not the APIs, it's the scoring and rating and the goal.
Yeah, but if you read that RFP discussion, and if you follow last week's discussion and a few before, this aims to be a solution to where do we allocate the funding, still on the infrastructure track where it's probably not needed at the moment, or do we apply a change to our system to get more funding for the product development? And if no product development happens with that funding, that guild doesn't qualify for the guild roster. But currently, some of the guilds qualify for the guild roster purely because of the infrastructure. And if it was a separate track system, I'm not sure if those underperforming APIs would be able to compete with Ross' perfect infrastructure setup.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. We don't need to have a two-track system for that. We just need to adjust how we measure and how we allocate the points, and can have the same output. And that's
You're right.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to clarify, that's the problem we are talking about, or which I identify as a problem, and include Null does also, and some of you guys agree that we are probably overfunding the technical infrastructure in some way or another. So that's really the problem we are talking about.
No,
So
I think the problem is we're under-evaluating.
Yeah,
The
that's what I
infrastructure.
would say as well.
Under-evaluating.
Yes.
Yes, because
I
we
don't-
don't take enough measurements and don't factor enough into the evaluation of these endpoints. So the problem is not that we have too many endpoints. The problem is that we give too many endpoints, too many points to bad endpoints.
if you take away the points, you won't have too many APIs.
You will
I
create
wrote-
new problems.
But there is not really too many APIs. There is right now we have more APIs than we need because we currently don't have much load.
Too many APIs.
But we
it's the same. Too many, or I mean, the same.
It's a different thing.
Okay,
It's a
I
different
don't
thing.
agree on that one.
Something.
No, in
I
the
think,
end,
I think it'll be great if, like, when we start using query, and it'll be
Yes.
a way to get all those too many APIs in inverted commas working together. So it'll be very easy for a user to get the most seamless, slippery experience, best experience, gold star experience whenever they try and engage with anything on chain.
there's also finally documentation on oneAPI.dev. That's essentially load balancer that uses all public APIs and routes them through Cloudflare before hitting an API based on availability and state. What you get a 404? I could just load and open it. It's open on my screen. That's weird. Can you open it, Rakita, and share?
What again?
I share a link for oneAPI dev docs.
Yeah, that's not.
Oh no, that's interesting. Yeah, I
For-
put
for,
oneAPI.dev.
Must be
And
running
then
in Hudsnake.
when I put oneAPI.dev, it redirects me to oneAPI.dev/docs. But if I directly access docs, I get the 442. So just go to you remove the docs.
Yeah, they rewrite and push state history,
Yeah.
but don't have an actual handler under it. It's just in a new way to build stuff. No offense.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to have. Nothing special, right? You just put every API that you host under a proxy. That's it. Under
No,
one
this is
URL.
this would redistribute the load more across your whole ecosystem, same as query, because you can just push your query against oneAPI.dev, and it will just pick any of the public API endpoints that are available. And if the call fails, it will just push it to the next.
Can you force like the default? I wrote some stuff in the chat. You can read later, but can't you just make sure that the Wax team implements something like this for their products? So that it was because of what Ross said before that he gets hammered so hard by like the official Wax stuff, and I can understand why, because it has a good reputation. But it's also unfair that the best performing BPs get hit even harder, incurring more costs.
Yeah, agree. I think it's a cost question. I hope that query will, to some extent, alleviate that. But yeah,
We need
Yeah.
to do more than hope. You need to actually push it.
yeah.
Okay, I think it's bedtime for me, guys. So I'm gonna.
Yeah, well, take care.
All right,
Take care,
right,
Ross.
everyone.
Good one.
Happy Wednesday.
Thank you.
Yeah, you too.
So yeah, I just wanted to be clear about that proposal, the two-track system, what it tries to solve. I'm not a huge fan of exactly the details in this proposal, but I just want to be clear about the purpose of that thing. It's more funding for the product side, a little less funding for less funding for unused APIs. And that's where I see that positively until
But
I hear something better.
I don't see this solving the issue of the funding of less used APIs. I don't see this changing anything in terms of funding to infrastructure.
So if it was actually more incentivizing to build products on Wax for the points, because it would have a higher multiplier or more of the allocated budget would go through towards the product contribution points, then I think it solves exactly that.
Yeah, but the two-track system, as proposed here, doesn't really do that. I think all we need to do is incentivize products more. That's it. We can just increase the points you get for products, and that would be the same. You would incentivize building products more.
I think that would harm some of the technical operators within the top 21 a little bit. which
but that's
still have 120 points on the infrastructure side, which is
The two-track
not
system will
rarely.
do that as well.
yeah, but you
Again,
can't.
please?
The problem is, yeah, sorry.
I couldn't understand Anders' comment.
Two-track system would harm it the exactly same way.
Exactly. That's how I see it. It would harm it exactly the same way. It wouldn't change that.
I can only
So-
look at our team. It would change absolutely nothing.
That's also how I see it looking at
It would
guilds.
only
and looking
create
at-
new things to focus on and new things to follow and do instead of actually figuring out what actually needs to be done.
I think what we can do is, in that case, we can go in and say, like, we increase the points for products and ecosystem contributions, and that way shift the weight more to products and ecosystem contributions. And then the guilds that have the heavy load, like Sweden and Ross, can just get ecosystem contribution scores for their redundant and heavy infrastructure. So that everybody that is just getting the infrastructure points from the flat infrastructure points is just getting like the flat fee.
Something that I understood lied at the core, at least from talks a while ago, was that you could have something like Michael that would not have to do a product and just focus on providing infrastructure and get paid for that, as well as me or Atomic Hub, right, in no Wombat right now, just have there be a guild based out of products and not the service so much. I thought that was the original
Yeah,
thing that started this.
yeah, exactly. And that was what I didn't understand, because that's what we already have, at least the one side. You can already just focus on product, and the only issue with that is that you then don't get into top 21. So the problem is they want to focus only on standby, only on infrastructure, but still be in production.
Well, did you have a talk with Michael about that? I'm just curious. We don't have to go into details, but is there
That
a
was on
reason?
the public calls. That was on the public calls. And that was one reason, the original reason, as I recall, for the two-track system, because the idea was to evaluate infrastructure separately from guild scores, and then base the production order of who is actually top 21, not on the total score, but only on the infrastructure score. So that the infrastructure guys with supposedly better performing hardware would be the ones actually producing and validating the blocks.
That will fail under the current system, because at the moment you receive your points based on quantity, not on quality.
I get the idea, but it sounds convoluted and unclear. So
Yeah, exactly. And that was my point. It's convoluted, it's unclear, and it fails because we don't properly evaluate quality. And that's also what I see if I look at, for example, at the tech scores, like the processing time of transactions. We see high product guilds, like, for example, Taco, that have like one of the best nodes by performance. While we have other guilds that are infrastructure heavy, or infrastructure focused, have worse performance on their endpoints. So just that somebody is focused on infrastructure does not mean that his infrastructure is better.
What I can also add here is that whatever you see right now is a symptom from how OIG has been rating and encouraging things to be run in the past. And what has been done is that any team focusing on quality and improving performance have not been rewarded for that. So there has been less and less reason to do that. Our internal discussions has always been, if we put in more work, we don't receive anything extra. If we put in less work, we don't receive anything less. So why should we put in more work?
Yeah,
That's the rating system, and that's the symptom that you see, that why would a team put in and invest in more hardware and faster hardware as the market grows and everything, new releases, when there's no change in any scoring, any rewards, anything like that.
Yeah, and this has grown out of two things. One thing is that, as mentioned earlier, we kept adding potential points for infrastructure. This was one thing. The other thing is that over the time of the bear market, we did not put so much pressure on new products because we felt the guilds are underfunded and don't really have the capacity to build new products. And now, 2-3 years later, guilds got used to not being required to do stuff. And now that we started to decay stuff more heavily and look more actively into what has been done over the past couple of weeks and months, there is quite a bit some stir. But if we want to bring guilds to build more and increase the competition and the incentive to actually build and maintain products, we probably need to go harder on that and also look into the amount of scores we get or currently get for infrastructure. For infrastructure.
What I found wild is to hear that in some cases people are comfortable with their position because it's manageable. That's disheartening a little bit, but I've heard that comment. But that's a whole other issue with you have a Web3 ecosystem, you have essential tools in it. Of course, you want them developed, maintained, innovating works, right? Wallets, marketplaces, DEXs, whatever it is. So that's another comment we heard often. It's hard to compete with existing products on Wax.
Yeah, especially because we have now products that are simply at the core of Wax. And it's getting harder. And the competition in the top 21 is getting harder because guilds are starting to get their niche. And then we are at the point that Ender stated, and we've also heard from other guilds, they don't really have a reason to release new stuff or work on new stuff because their position doesn't really change. They drop slightly within top 21 or they rise slightly within top 21, but they don't earn or receive less or more pay. So there's no incentive for them to release new stuff.
And that's maybe also a controversial comment I will make. It's only my personal comment, not any official capacity, but our G points are essentially not funding the development of new products, even though that happens a lot. Their main purpose is to maintain the development of products and the underlying infrastructure to run those products, to keep providing them to the community. So it's purely the maintenance cost.
Yeah, that's also something. So that was also the point why we put less pressure on the guilds for the last 2 years, because for us it was always, if the wax price is below 8 cents, the parachute kicks in. And the parachute kicks in to allow guilds to maintain a minimum level of activity, to maintain what they have, maintain the infrastructure, maintain manpower as much as possible, and maintain what they already have. And it's not really intended to fund the development of new products. And so we just dropped further down on the token price as we hoped, and it took longer to get back up, and we're still not really back up. So from my perspective, it was always like, either you have a commercial product that you build with somebody else that is built to make a profit, or you build something that could be funded from Wax Labs, and then you maintain it, and this maintenance is then supposed to be covered from the guild rewards.
I have a wild idea. We should, have a competing guild roster within the top 21, like even competing in pay, like 20% difference between position 1 and 21.
Yeah, actually, this is something I proposed when I introduced the parachute. I proposed to also adjust the pay, how it works within the top 21. So right now you have the scaling pay for the standbys, and the idea was for the top 21 to also have some level of scale, so that the top 1 guild would receive like 10%. So right now you get top 21 gets 15% more pay than standby. And the idea was to scale that every guild gets like 1 something percent more the further they up. So the median would be guild 11, and then it would scale up to guild top 1 and then down to top 21, so that there was essentially not be an additional gap between top 21 and standby, so that the 21st guild is essentially just one small step from the 22nd. The problem with that is that the top 21, sorry, yes?
I like that.
Yeah, the problem with that is that the current top 21 roster is based on scores, not on points. And this is where the system fails. So this would require full redesign of the current governance system, where the on-chain production order, not production order, but voting order, would be adjusted to the OIG score. So I also had an idea for that. That would be weight the votes they get based on the score they have on the OIG score sheet. But the problem with that is that officially the WAX blockchain is decentralized and not controlled by a single entity. And the OIG should not have the control over that. So we can't really, at this point, without a WAX foundation or without the OIG being an official institution with authority, do that.
You mean
Because-
the daily block rewards, right? But the parachute system, we
Yeah, I'm just talking about the daily block rewards. But to do that, we would need to adjust the daily block rewards. This would need to be implemented on a system level inside the daily block rewards. And we have that on other chains. Other chains have scaling pay within the top 21, one way or another. So that's nothing new. We just would have to adjust it to our needs. But the problem is this gap between who is actually in production and who has the highest OIG score. If you look at Wax Block.io right now, the top 21 guilds are not anywhere near the order you see them based on the guild score, on the OIG score. So for example, Aloha EOS is currently guild number 1 with the highest amount of votes. So the only one closest is Sweden.
Yeah, that should be fixed. That's probably the biggest problem to solve right now.
And this also extends further. So this is something we can't solve until we have solved the legal underlying issues. And that's that the OIG doesn't really actually have the authority here. So the OIG is only supposed to give guidance to the voters, and it just happens that the majority stake of voters is the WAX team, and they decide to align with the OIG score. But they always vote with all their tokens, and this means everybody in top 21 is getting the same amount of votes, and then only the community votes determine who is in what order inside top 21. And these votes then mostly are based on legacy votes that are not updated or rarely updated at all. I mean, if you look at the proxies, the Blocks.io proxy is still the 3rd biggest proxy, and he's voting for multiple guilds that haven't been in production for years. So Blocks.io proxy is still voting for
I think I vote for someone also outside.
EH42 Freedom, Hyperblocks, Zenblocks. So like half the guilds is not even in production anymore. Oh, it actually could get close to a point where it's voting. Yeah, not yet. I'm questioning what would happen if, that would be interesting, if Blocks.io proxy is voting for less than 16 active guilds, because if you vote for less than 16 guilds, you don't get any staking rewards. And the more of these guilds that go away, Blocks.io proxy is voting for, we might at some point end up with guilds that don't, with stakers that vote for it and don't have 16 guilds anymore. That could be interesting. But yeah, this change in that area require a whole overhaul of the core governance system, of the legal structure of WAX as a whole, and of the system contracts.
Couldn't you add a not maintained label for proxies that are not in good active standing?
Yeah, the problem is most people still use WAX blocks.io, and that itself is not maintained.
It was shut off also on EOS.
Yeah, I just mean for like in the other places where you have, I mean in Waxblock, for instance, they also get listed, but maybe if there's like a known list of set of proxies that are not actively maintained, just make sure that there's.
I think most people that go through Waxblock will know what they do to vote. And if you vote on my cloud wallet, it automatically picks the highest. It automatically picks the top, the OIG proxy. Not sure if they filtered out. I know they did filter out some proxies at some point before the redesign of the cloud, but I'm not sure if they still do it.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that was a lot of content again. Let's follow up with the RFP discussion on the subjective billing testing tool.
And
someone available to put up that discussion?
For what specifically? Sorry.
Defining the subjective billing test case.
Oh yeah, we can do that. I can do that.
Okay, wonderful. And then the other thing, let's not stick with the name 2-track system because I think it has bad sentiment to it. But we have
a 2-track system.
Yeah. Let's find another word for it and let's iterate on it. I think it's a vital discussion about some important changes or some potential changes that could have a positive impact. Just not lightly taken and also not a lot of considerations. And I think we are going to have much more talks about it until we come to a good decision.
Would be good to properly define the actual problem idea, 1, 2, 3 ideas for how that could be approached, and then the likely outcome of that in these topics created.
Yeah,
you're absolutely right.
I want to see it clear. This is a problem. This do I want to solve. This could come out of it. I think that's what the important part is.
Yeah. Because otherwise, it's just it's the shallow topics that are being discussed.
Otherwise, we just spin in circles, just written instead of verbal, like we did before.
We got 2 other topics I would like us to prioritize next week. 2 things. The one is Query Hub, and that we want the guilds to register their endpoints on the Query Hub.
This will become mandatory.
Yeah, this will become mandatory anytime soon, but need to talk about that. There was a registration. Should we invite Igor again for a short walkthrough on how to register on that site?
It's very simple.
I think there's a recording of that also from end of October, I think.
You log in with your BP account and then you add your endpoint. Done.
Okay, we don't need any demo for that. And the other thing is
for Hyperion it's a bit more complicated. You need to have the right version, and if you have an older version, you can't simply upgrade to new version because you also need a new Elasticsearch version. And upgrading your database version is not always something you just want to do. It can create a lot of problems.
Okay, so this sounds like it would make sense to have Igor with us to
I'm not
tell us a
sure
little bit.
we need to have Igor for that, but we need to have proper documentation on what is required, and then we need to define proper timeframes, right?
But weren't they still building and working on it actively? It's still
Yeah,
like
they
not
are,
there
and there are
yet?
some issues to solve. For how they collect metrics and how they report endpoints and everything.
I would just make sure to reach out async to them and just get a feel for them from, hey, when do you think we could take a next step and do a more broad introduction?
Yeah. Also inquired with the Amsterdam team to potentially get Light API listed in there, because it also has become an essential API on Wax.
New Hyperion
So I
has
can-
endpoints that Light API, the main use case of Light API as well. At least for me.
Does that API work with a partial Hyperion node?
Depends.
Okay, because I think that was one of the problems
Yeah, so the account
they were facing.
account indexing, a separate account indexing thing that he's working on. I don't know status on it.
Okay, got it. And then the other topic we need to prioritize is Atomic Assets NFT rentals proposal is up for review. We are requesting reviewers of the smart contract and of the API. We will kindly invite the team next Tuesday to talk to us about the changes in the potential rollout on testnet, which we also need to tackle anytime soon. So that we have it on testnet, we can test it and then roll it out on mainnet eventually at some point. But also they are requesting reviewers for the API and for the smart contracts.
Quick
You
note
can
there,
find-
like to
Yeah.
check everything out, it will really help if it's already on testnet, right? Because that makes it so much easier to verify stuff that you're looking at.
Good point.
I mean, it's doable without. It just means it takes more effort. And depending on how certain they are of how good it is, I can understand that they maybe don't want to do that yet. But if they are like, okay, I think this is good, really, then I would say make sure it goes onto testnet, and then you have a better way to evaluate everything.
There's also one step missing in between, which is merging the PR into a branch test or whatever we want to call it, and then merging it upstream into the Atomic Assets repositories, the respective repositories for the contracts and the API, and then having that test branch in the official repository so that you can check it out and run it on testnet. That wasn't done yet, pretty sure.
I have another question, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
Recently, you posted some new contributions that guilds made.
Yeah.
And I quickly looked through them, and I had quite a lot of notes to them. And I wonder, like, how are these things evaluated and scored? Because there were some obvious things in there that I wondered, does it get sent back? Like, hey, there's stuff you need to do before it gets even points? Or I just wondered if you could shed a light on that.
So in some cases, we give feedback when we evaluate something. It's not that we don't grant any point if we have any feedback on it. We often consider a product as in development, so we want to see it improve. We have talks with the guilds regularly in some channels, especially that guild that you reviewed heavily, Caracol, for example.
Yeah, we actually had a long discussion about granting them points or not granting them points, and we had exactly the same issue you had, and this is what we pointed out and said, we're granting them points this evaluation and tell them that needs to be improved, or we're taking the points away again.
Exactly. So it's put on decay, it's decaying relatively fast, So if they don't improve on it, they don't receive any score anymore.
Did say they already improved it. I didn't have time to test it yet. But I think they said there is some pagination now.
Does that answer your question?
Thanks.
Also appreciate a lot your feedback on that. It's exactly the kind of feedback they're looking for. I think they didn't acknowledge the messages. It was some other guy, but I tagged him, as you see, a little below. Or did I forward it to them? I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure they saw it and they will incorporate all the feedback.
Yeah, you've tagged them, but we already also told them directly. Or I told them directly. Also, but now they changed that. You can now export define start and ending pages for the export. But what I don't see anymore is the amount of transactions per page. I don't see filters to just filter for like WEX transactions. So this is a bit weird. So yeah, they definitely still have to improve this.
So I see 105 pages.
Yeah, I had
Yeah.
a few thousand, but maybe they can talk to Anders because he actually worked on stuff like this that went into a lot more detail for quite a bit. So I think he might have some good ideas.
I have a lot of ideas and half done things there.
Lot of ideas.
Time
topic we
is
still-
hard.
What-
Exporting
Taiwan-
transactions and what information is interesting. What happens if you put in like atomic market in that query? I never tested it.
No, let me do that actually.
Don't think anything big.
No, it's basically just the raw transactions, so it doesn't go into much detail there.
Okay.
It's not like all the things that you did for tax with like prices in time, making it all actually usable for taxes.
Yeah, that's very annoying to do.
I know it's
Taxes.
a lot of the work that you did. So
Yeah, when you put atomic market into it, it dies.
Yeah, I
I
figured.
just tested it.
It should time out. It's too much data to request unless you have optimized things.
It says API error or invalid account after a time, after 60 seconds.
I
which is,
tried it on
default
our
HTTP
API and I failed 1 in 10 tries, I think. I tried 10 times and I only failed once on a timeout.
Yeah, let me quickly remove those points.
Talk to them
but
about it.
it's also like,
I was just kidding.
yeah,
But,
but basically the tool is mostly like, hey, here's the raw log, but it's if you actually want to do it for accounting, it's by no way near enough, at least for most countries.
Yeah. But it's a starting point. It's a
Yeah, but
starting
it's near impossible to actually build the product because the amount of people that would use it would have to pay like large amounts to recoup the cost that it would take to build this because it's an insane amount of work involved.
Also, from what I used in the past, I think just having a raw transaction log can almost be enough to use it for tax because many of the tax tools pull their own price data. So you only give them the transaction timestamps and everything, and they will add the price on their own.
They also charge per transaction when you reach over a certain amount.
Yeah, that's a different
It's
story.
very expensive.
Yeah, it depends on what software you use.
And I needed to add 3 million transactions.
Yeah, that sounds like fun.
It's impossible. Well, it's possible if you want to pay more than you made from it.
Yeah, I mean, coin tracking has it's like the cap, right? They have open end on the highest license. Supposedly open end.
They usually have a limit. When I looked, they might have changed something.
There's like tiers. So you have enterprise level with supposedly without a limit, and then you have the professional tier that's 20k, 50k, or 100k depending on how much you pay. And if you go enterprise, you pay like, I don't know, 5k for a lifetime license or something. I don't have the number in my head, but then it's supposedly open.
My issue with the tool is if I fetch my wallets through APIs, I get like 90% of the transactions are some scam tokens that were sent to my wallet at some point in time.
Yeah, I have a big filter list for that for the things I'm building.
Exactly, but I at some point I wasn't able to import the proper transactions because it was feeding back those scam tokens, and I couldn't filter them out at that time when I was querying because I was reaching my limit. So I did something else in coin tracking.
And then they find that token name for a different token on CoinGecko or something, and it's evaluated
And
crazy.
suddenly your net worth is $10 million.
Yeah.
It's really annoying.
So yeah, next time somebody asks you what should I build, I think you got an idea now.
Yeah, but the problem is this is so complicated. It's not something we can
Yeah, I know.
properly expect to be done by Guild. We have a couple solutions that are, in my opinion, dangerous to use. Like Wax Galaxy built, was it Coinly? I don't know. They built a tax
not
software.
Coinly.
CryptoScat.
I use Coinly.
CryptoScat, yeah, CryptoScat, and CryptoScat is, in my opinion, dangerous because if you use it, it has too many issues that could get you in big trouble.
Isn't scat the Swedish word for taxes?
Yeah, and SCAT is more fun in English.
Anyway,
Yeah, don't Google that one.
Depends what you're into, right?
we also need to talk about the
Okay.
elections this week and next week. Yeah, this is something we need to put some focus on because nobody is talking about it. So it's at least not as much drama as the last couple times, but if nobody is talking about it, it's also a problem.
What? Which problem?
OIG election. I just
Yeah.
concluded the recording, sorry.
Wait,
I
just-
won't start it again.
I have it on still.
I wanted to conclude the call, honestly, with mentioning those two topics for the next week, but
Sorry.
With
It's okay.
innovation this week and voting next week, this is something we need to keep in mind. And
Kfir just don't want anyone to talk about it.
yeah,
It's also
exactly.
good to bring it up on the Thursday, probably, because that's more
Yes,
accessible to the non-tech people. But yeah, also, like, to be honest, people don't expect you to be replaced. So I can understand why there's low interest.
Yeah, that's a different story. But it can't be just me running.
Can someone
do a
create a
shitty
wallet?
job and you'll get more opponents.
Because if we don't have somebody else to run, the smart contract won't start the election.
Sounds like a you problem.
It will just draw out indefinitely.
But you can sign up your kid as well.
Yeah. For my assistant, I can sign up my assistant, and my assistant can run against me.
Can we get T-Break in there? I want that island to happen.
Yeah, I'm all for an island and a party on Bali. I still need to do the NFT drop. I'll do an NFT drop. And
It's difficult to find candidates because there's not enough people active in the discussions with the knowledge and everything required.
yeah, that's true. I think T-Break is definitely a good candidate.
I think he wants to become a guild in January. But
No, we need good candidates.
we also
There's
need
more
good
elections.
guilds.
Yeah, we also need good guilds, but we also need good candidates. We can't just have all candidates just become guilds and then decide not to be an IG because it's too much work.
To be fair, the guild route is probably a lot easier.
I don't know.
Ask Mike about that one.
Like was also a great candidate.
He's become the top 2 guild on WAC.
Okay, anyway, let's conclude the call.